Sound is one of the most important aspects of playing any brass instrument, and it's something that I like to practice within my warm-up each day. I use the James Stamp book to achieve this mainly, and in particular I've chosen the first exercise to show you today. But what I'm thinking about when playing this is to make sure that my throat is nice and open so that I can achieve some warm air down the instrument. I'm not trying to keep my embouchure closed at all, but quite the opposite. And I want to make sure that the air support that I'm giving the note or on the instrument ultimately is constant all the time so that the note doesn't flat or dip under. So it goes a little something like this. So I'm always trying to make sure that the notes are in tune, so that the intonation is good, and that the slurs between the notes are consistent and clean. But there are plenty of different exercises that you can practice your sound on, and ultimately, as I said earlier, you can make sure that your sound is good no matter what note you're playing. Dexterity is something that all brass players want to improve so that we can have a better technique. But it's important to understand a couple of ground rules. You must know your scales. Scales are so important for many, many reasons, but it means that if you know your scales, when you approach a piece of music or solo or study, you have a much better chance of playing the difficult passages or the passages that have extended technique within them because you know your scales and they are much, much more recognizable. The other thing that to consider is to practice exercises to improve technique. The one that I'm going to show you is from the Herbert Clark Technical Exercises book, and it's the second study. And this is a really good exercise because it works the third finger, the third valve, which is often the weakest, or always the weakest in fact, and it's often the one that we overlook and maybe don't improve because it's the most difficult too. So this exercise goes a little something like so. So as you can see, it's really difficult to control that third valve and the airflow going through the instrument as well at the same time. So there's quite a few different things that you can practice using that particular exercise. You could also include some single or some double tonguing, not just slurring, but that exercise alone will really, really work your third finger, which is, as I said earlier, the most difficult. But dexterity is something that we need to address every single day when you practice. Flexibility is probably the area that I focus most on in my playing and in my practice every day. It's ultimately the art of moving between one note and another quickly or slowly, depending on the exercise that you may be doing. But it's very, very important to understand that flexibility can aid range, it can aid consistency, pitching, amongst many other things. There are various books that you can get hold of which will help with flexibility. There's the Walter Smith Flexibility Exercise book, as well as the Charles Collins and the How Brass Players Do It. They're the three that I tend to use. But I also make up my own flexibility exercises as well. So I'm going to play you a couple of flexibility exercises here today, some from the book and some from the exercises that I've made up or that I particularly do every day. But when I'm doing these exercises, what I'm trying to do is to keep a focused and sturdy, stable embouchure so that my embouchure doesn't dip every time I change notes, which will ultimately lead to flat notes. So I'm making sure that the airstream and the airflow is constant through the instrument, keeping the embouchure as still as I can, and just allowing the tongue to change pitch for me as I go up and down. So a simple flexibility exercise to get things going. And then I might crank the speed up a little so I can increase the velocity of the air that's going through the instrument and also the tongue speed as well. So a little exercise in thirds. After that, I'll probably go to exercises in fifths. When it comes to articulation, it's important to understand that the tongue is a muscle, and that muscle can be trained and strengthened just like any other muscle in your body can. There are lots of different exercise books that you can go to, but I like to choose the Arbon because there are just so many articulation exercises within it. When I'm practicing my single tonguing in particular, I'm thinking of two things. I'm thinking about keeping the tongue short and about increasing the speed. Now when we articulate, the tongue moves back into the mouth, so the further back it will go, the longer it will take to get back to the front of the mouth again. So I always try and imagine that my tongue will move no further than maybe a centimetre back in my mouth, hopefully keeping it as short as possible. And as I said, the other thing that I like to consider when practicing single tonguing is the speed, because by improving speed will improve consistency and strength in itself. So I always practice with a metronome, that's quite important. The exercise that I'll show you is from the Arbon, and it's a simple single tonguing exercise which goes like this. So I'm trying to keep the tongue as light and as neat as possible, whilst not allowing it to go too far back in the mouth. But yeah, articulation and tonguing and multiple tonguing is something that I do every single day, just so that my tongue stays really, really strong and in shape. I think we can all agree that the best part about playing any musical instrument is that it's fun. But it is important to strike a balance when we practice between having fun and also practicing the basics, which are going to improve us and allow us to play harder and more challenging music. Now, I try to do exactly that in my practice routine. Almost half of it is spent on articulation, on flexibility, on breathing, on long tones, on scales, and then the rest of it is spent playing solos or challenging myself to a new study. Now, I'm going to show you a study today from the Arbon. It's number 13 from the back of the Arbon, and this will mainly focus on dexterity, but it also includes breathing and a little bit of flexibility as well. But hopefully the exercises that I've done and that I showed you earlier in this little series will go some way to demonstrating how they can pay off in a study such as this.